Hello, everyone. It is wonderful to see you. Hello, Rena. I am delighted that Rena will be joining us for the next half an hour and telling us her story. Rena, let's go right into it. And I would like to begin with maybe tell us something about what you remember about your home.
Okay, first I'd like to thank you very much for allowing us to come today. I feel very privileged to be alive, and I feel very privileged and honored to be able to speak to such a distinguished, illustrious audience. And thank you very much for caring of what happened. And we hope that the events of today will work out better than they are working out right now. My story is different from most Holocaust stories. First of all, 1.5 million Jewish children were murdered for no other reason that they were Jewish children. Most children who did survive did so by being in Christian homes, in convents, and nunneries, and hiding on false papers. They had some people who helped them, not enough. My story is different because when you lose your mother and your father, your brothers, and everybody in your family, you have no one. But every time I lost somebody, thank God very much so, somebody came and helped me. And then my story is different because it has a happy ending. I can say that for 6 million who were killed, and 1 million others besides the Jewish people who were killed in the war. And thank God I'm alive. What I remember from my past, I was 3.5 years old when the war started, and 9.5 when the war ended. And all that time, I was in incarceration. I was in the ghetto. I was in various camps. What I remember before, David, is that I lived in a lovely house. Maybe you have a picture of that house. And yes, I have this. No, that's the synagogue. Okay, yeah, this is the inside of the house. I had the outside. In 1989, I went back to Poland, and I found lots of documents, including the house. And the Polish woman living in the house told me she remembered my father. I don't remember him, but I did get a lot of documentation. I wrote a book and with somebody who did a lot of research for me. When I went back to 1989, I found the house. I found that my mother in 1930 had a store, and my father was a tailor, and they lived in a very nice house. I lived there with my mother and my father and my brothers. But when I was 3.5 years old, in September 1st, 1939, the Germans came into Poland. And as soon as they came in, the war started. The Polish army was not ready for them. And I was outside with my mother and my brothers. Planes came in, tanks came in, the German army marched right in. The Polish army didn't even have proper shoes and proper uniforms. My mother quickly took us down to the cellar where there were potatoes and other things waiting because people sort of anticipated that this might happen. There were other neighbors who also came down there. The war started very, very quickly. And at one point, they took my father to slave labor camp. He was taken with other able-bodied men like my uncle, and he was lucky to be taken because people said that if you would work, they wouldn't take you to those other places, which were so terrible. Nobody believed that the Germans, cultured, civilized people, would have gas chambers and shootings and pits to shoot people right in. Nobody wanted to believe it, and nobody wanted to hear of it. My father was taken away. I remained in the house with my mother and my 2 brothers, David and Joseph. My mother must have come from a well-to-do family, and the reason I know that, because in 1930, when my parents were married, my mother made a pre-nuptial agreement where a lawyer wrote a contract of what she brought into the marriage, and she had some jewelry, and she had a coat, and she had furniture. My father apparently didn't have very much, but she wrote that. Can you imagine in 1930, without women's lib, she was willing to do things. She was way, ahead of her time. My mother, because she had some money, was able to trade maybe her coat or her shoes or jewelry to get us bread. Because as soon as the Germans came in, they put a barbed wire fence around the Jewish section, and that was called a ghetto. And then sometimes later, people in surrounding villages couldn't stay there, and they came in. And the ghetto was very crowded. There wasn't enough food. People were starving. There wasn't enough medicine, and people, of course, were getting sick. The weather was very cold, the way it is now when you see what's happening in Eastern Europe, and there wasn't enough heat. But we went along. But one day, there was banging down at the door, middle of the night, saying, "Rouse, rouse, fast. You have to get up, and you have to run down these terrible stairs." You can see them before.
These?
Yes, these stairs, but you have the next picture where, no, and we ran down the stairs. People fell on top of each other. People were crying. There were babies. There were old people. There were pregnant women. And we were brought into this big square. 2,000 people had been gathered around from the ghetto. And from there, we were herded through the streets like animals, one after other, beaten and clubbed until we got to the synagogue. The synagogue, you can see it. It's a beautiful building. And it was not damaged so much during the war. But unfortunately, there are no Jews left in Piotrkow, not a one. So the synagogue has been made into a library, which is better than a stable or completely torn down. But you can see in the library, you can see the books, and I'm there in that red jacket with two women whom I hired to help me find a lot of the documents, a lot of things that I thought I knew, but I wasn't sure of. In back of that synagogue, you can see a door. I was in this big room with my mother and my two brothers, and they were shooting and going on, and people were dropping dead. Chaos, pandemonium. You can see me pulling open the curtain of the library, and there behind it you can see a picture of the 10 Commandments in Hebrew and bullet holes. Those bullet holes, if anybody stood near there or any place else, of course, if that bullet would get to them, they were shot. And where people were being shot all the time, and babies were thrown around. I was 6 years old at this point, and my brothers were like 8, 9 and a half. I'm sure I must have been holding on to my mother's arm. I'm sure my brothers must have been holding on to my mother, because that's what little children do. I'm sure my mother must have been holding on to me. I don't really have any documents to prove this. But in the back of that door that I showed you, there was a man. I'm not quite sure he was. I was calling him uncle. Maybe he was an uncle, or was the polite way of saying something to an older man. My name at that time was Freida, or Freidel. I tell you at that time because I've had 6 different names. I've had 6 different names. I've had 6 different mothers. I was a boy. I was a girl. It's pretty amazing that I know who I am, but I do. This man told me to run. I don't know where I got the courage. I don't know where I got the nerve. Maybe my mother pushed me. Maybe God pushed me. I let go of my mother. I let go of my mother's hand. My mother let go of me, and she pushed me, and I ran. I don't know how a child of 6 would let go of her mother's hand when she's so scared. She's so petrified, and the bullets are flying. I ran out. The soldiers could have shot me. They could have bopped me over the head. They could have pushed me back. Maybe they didn't see me because there was pandemonium and chaos. Or maybe they figured, how far is this kid going to run? Let the next soldier shoot her. I don't know how it happened, but I ran out. That was the last time I saw my mother and my brothers and the rest of all those people, including many family members. Nobody in the family survived. They were taken to Treblinka. We have some pictures of Treblinka, and that's a picture of Treblinka. That's where they were taken. And there are 17,000 stones to remember 860,000 people who were murdered in Treblinka. I never saw any of them. None of them stayed alive.
Rena, can I ask you another question, which is actually a follow-up? It seems miraculous, just the mere fact that you passed sort of that one event. And I do know your story, and those events continue on and on, those sort of small, impossible events that happened to you. So I would like to hear from you, how is it that you did survive from this point on?
Well, this man took me to my father, who was working in a glass factory. There were 3 factories in our hometown. They were slave labor camps run by the Germans. They worked very, very hard. When my father saw me, he hugged me and he kissed me, and he was so happy that I was still with him. He did not know what happened to the other people. I often think of my mother on taking that last ride on those cattle cars to Treblinka. Was she worried about her little boys, or was she worried about her baby daughter whom she let go out in that terrible neighborhood? I hope she's looking down to see that I am speaking to a beautiful group of people in Taiwan, people who want to remember and never forget, as you mentioned. I hope she's looking down and feeling that we do remember, and we feel so bad that there's a war going on at this point and so many people are getting killed. My father first hid me. When that was impossible, he said, we have to have a talk. And he said, from now on, you're not a girl anymore because girls are useless. You're a boy of 10, because boys over the age of 10 could work. And your name is no longer Freida, it's now Freud, a boy's name. He cut my hair. He found some clothes to put on me. I learned to speak Polish in the grammar of a boy. I had to be very careful going to the bathroom, getting undressed. I was a boy. More correctly, I was a man. I was a man who had to work. And my job was bringing water to the people in the factory, sometimes to drink it, because if they were so dehydrated and if they would faint or die, they wouldn't work. And their whole purpose was to have them work. But the water was also to put the glass that was manufactured from those hot ovens, the glass would cool it off. The people worked very hard. I brought that water every day. More than anything I remember in that camp were the dogs. They had big German vicious dogs. And anytime one of our captors wanted to show who was in charge, if that dog would take a bite of your arm, it was like a death sentence, because if you couldn't lift your arm, if you couldn't work, they would shoot you. If got infected, too bad. They would shoot you. They had plenty of people to take your place. The fear of those dogs never leaves you. Many of the men helped me out. They knew if somebody came in, someone of the Germans came in, they would try to hide me. People helped me out all the time. But one day, the Allies, meaning the Russians, the Americans, and the British, were getting closer. This was the end of 44. And the Germans wanted to hide everything they had done. There were 6 extermination camps: Auschwitz, Majdanek, Sobibor, Chełmno, Treblinka, and Belsen. They were all in Poland. There were concentration camps throughout Europe. The Germans decided to take the people out of the extermination and concentration camps that were in Poland and send them to other places. So once again, we had to march through to the Umschlagplatz, a place where they had these terrible cattle cars, and 80 to 100 people were pushed into those cars. We didn't even have stairs. Animals have ramps or something to go on. Everybody had to push everybody else in, or the people in the cars to pull you in. 80 to 100 people were pushed into those cars. When the car was full, they would close the door. It was pitch black inside. There was nothing to eat. There was nothing to drink, and there was one pail for a toilet. Sometimes these trips could take 3 days. Can you imagine? Nothing to eat, nothing to drink. And even if you don't eat and drink, you have to go to the bathroom. But you couldn't even get over. And people got so weak, and people were moaning, and people were crying, and people were dying, and people soiled themselves. So the whole place was one big, messy toilet. The stench was just incredible. I don't know how anybody survived it. Finally, we crossed the border from Germany to Poland, and the doors were open, and we had to jump out onto the snow. It seems to me it always snowed. I know that's not true, because I've been back to Poland in the spring and in the summer, and the sun is shining, and there are trees, and there are flowers and things growing. I don't remember it ever being warm. It was always freezing cold, because we didn't have a coat. We had just a uniform. We didn't have shoes. When we came into Poland, we had to jump down from the cars into the snow. We used the snow to eat it, because we were so famished. We used the snow to drink it. And we used the light, because it had been so pitch black in those cars, to look around who was still there. And while we were looking around, there were people who came from, there were 3 camps: woodworking, tanning of leather, and the man's camp that I was with was Hortensia Glass Factory. While we were getting used to this new situation, Germans on motorcycles, one driving and the other one sitting in the seat next to it, came, and with loudspeakers they made an announcement: "You're being taken to camps. Men on one side, women on the other." My father had a problem right now, because he knew, I didn't know anything, I was a child, but he knew that when you'd go into the camps, you would have to get undressed. You would have to take off all your clothes and leave all your belongings. If I would get undressed, they would see I'm not one of the men, and they would kill me, and they would kill my father, and anybody who tried to help me. My father gave me some pictures and of my mother and my father and 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. And he met a school teacher, and he asked her whether she would keep an eye on me. And he promised me. He promised that the war is going to be over right away. You can see the Allies coming in. War will be over. And he promised to meet me in our hometown in Piotrkow in Poland. He promised, and fathers are supposed to keep their promises. My father didn't keep his promise. I never saw him again. I don't know if he was killed in Buchenwald. We have a train schedule, David, if you would show it. The Germans were very, very good about keeping all kinds of records. And this is a train schedule of the people who were taken from Poland to Buchenwald. I don't have anything about Bergen Belsen, because Bergen Belsen was completely burnt down, all the records and everything that they had there. So he went to Buchenwald. I had a new mother, and the women were going to be taken to a place called Ravensbrück or Bergen Belsen. We started walking in the snow. I didn't have a father, but I had a new mother. I don't even remember her name. But as we were walking in the snow, if somebody sat down for a minute, they were shot. If somebody fell down, they were shot. As you went along, there was blood and bodies and blood and bodies. And there we trudged along without shoes, or sometimes people had wooden clogs, which hurt so much when the snow got into them. Or they didn't have coats, they didn't have hats. I don't know how anybody survived it. And finally, when we got into Bergen Belsen, just the way my father predicted, we had to get undressed and leave everything we had. I don't know that people had very much, but I did. I had a picture that my father gave me, and I was holding it in my hand, and I really was holding it very tightly. One of the Germans must have thought that either I had a diamond or jewelry or money. He pried open my hand. He must have been very disappointed, because all I had was pictures. He tore them up and threw them away. To him, it was garbage. To me, it would have been, do I look like anybody? Do I resemble my mother or my father? Do my children look like anybody in the family? Do my grandchildren? Do my great-grandchildren? I have no idea what my mother, my father, and brothers looked like. I just don't remember that. We went into the showers, and when we, cold showers, and they were water, they were not gas. And when we came out, we were shivering because we were cold, because we were scared, we were humiliated. This woman, my new mother, stole a black coat. She took a black coat from the pile that somebody had left. She could have been killed for doing such a terrible thing. But I think she saved my life with that, because she kept the coat and her body heat around me. And maybe that gave us a little bit of heat, because it was freezing cold. And I don't know what happened to the woman. I don't know what happened to the coat. But these were the kind of toilets that you see that we went into. Can you imagine a whole group of women, 100 women going in at one time to take care of their needs? And if you didn't get into one of these toilets, you'd go into a pit outside. And you know how scary it is to go to take care of your needs in a pit in case you'd fall in there. What would happen? And these were the kind of barracks. By the time we got there, they were all broken down. Every woman, 5 or 6 women, when they came out of the showers, would get a blanket. Can you imagine covering yourself in a bunk bed like that, 5 or 6 women together? Every day, the most important thing was food. And the food we got was old soup that smelled like garbage because it was made out of garbage, and some black bread. And every day, hundreds of people died, and the women would take their blanket and put a body in there and just throw it someplace. You can see on the side there, bodies, any place you found, just dead bodies all over. In Auschwitz, gas. In Bergen Belsen, you smelled death. Death was all around you. One day, I was very sick with typhus. But to say that I was sick with typhus, everybody was sick with typhus. It's a very contagious disease, and you get it with lice and fleas. And the barracks we slept in on the floor with a straw was filled with lice and fleas and rats. And with the scratching and the blood just contained everybody got sick with typhus. I found myself under trees. Do you have that picture of the trees? Under those trees with dead bodies, some live alive, some dead, and I knew that this one died yesterday and this one died tomorrow and this one is going to be dead in a few minutes. You just knew that that was natural. I didn't know how much longer I would be alive. But something happened that day that never happened before. Soldiers wearing different uniforms, speaking a different language. Some of them were throwing up because the smell and what they saw was something that was just nothing that they could imagine. And they came and they made an announcement. We are the British Army. We have come to bring you food and clothes, and you are free. You can do whatever you want. What do I want to do? I'm sick. These women found some old potatoes that you can see them smiling. Anyway, the British had a very hard time. The first thing they had to do.
I'm very happy. I want you now to really, as you're continuing, to describe for them the point of liberation, from the British Army on.
Okay.
And
the British Army worked very hard, very hard. The first thing they had to do was build big ditches. And they got, can you show the pictures of the ditches, please? And bury all the people. 10,000 bodies were around. The next picture will show you not only, okay, so leave that, that's fine. Here, they had to get rid of all the bodies, to get rid of all the smell and infectious diseases. And then they tried to feed people, and 14,000 people died after the war, 2,000 because they ate the wrong food. We have nothing to eat. You can't give somebody a chocolate bar or a good ham sandwich. And then they burnt down all the barracks that the Jewish people lived in because they were so filled with rats, with fleas, with everything, and feces, everything that you could imagine. There was nothing left but any kind of records that they had, everything was destroyed. And then they took us meaning some of the children and some of the mothers or sick people, to Sweden. Sweden had not been at war, it was neutral. And so we were taken to displaced persons camp in Sweden. Many of the things that I tell you, I have proof of without remembering. And this is a document that I have of where I was transferred from German concentration camps to Sweden, the first DP camp, or they called it an alien camp. But I was very sick with typhus, with diphtheria, with some sort of lung disease. Everybody was sick. And they took me to a Hasselholm hospital where a wonderful Christian family came to visit me, and they brought me a doll. I can't remember having a doll before. And then they asked if I want to go and live with them. Well, I very much wanted to have a mother and a father and beautiful people who gave me gifts. But the people around me said that I was Jewish and I should go to Palestine. Why did I say Palestine? Because there was no Israel. That's why Israel is so important to us. If we only had an Israel in 1938 instead of 1948, just 10 little years, if only the countries of the world would have opened their doors to refugees. We didn't have anybody. Nobody at all cared for us. But Sweden did take us in. But they said that my mother and my father and my brothers were in Palestine. So I didn't want to go with this Christian couple. And I went to a different camp. And I was going to go to Palestine. But I met a new woman who became my mother. Her name was Anna. I do remember what she looked like. And she had a son and daughter. Her daughter was 9.5 years old. Anna's brother had sent her tickets and immigration papers and all the things that she needed to come to America. Somebody had to sponsor you. And I was going to go to Palestine. Anna's daughter died. When she died, Anna had all the proper things to take her to America. And she asked me if I wanted to go. And I said, yes, I want to go, because everybody told me America would be a wonderful place. So I went with my new mother, Anna, to America. And we went on a ship and everything was beautiful. And we had food and people running and singing. And I became a child again. And the people in Sweden had really given us medicine and cod liver oil and puddings to fatten us up. And we came to America, and Anna's family met us and got us a little apartment. Anna, her son Sigmund, and I, who got her name and her birthday. I didn't have my birthday, so I got Fanny's birthday, which I still use today, but I found my real birthday. Everything was fine for a short time, but then we went to a summer bungalow colony, a little house, and I went to camp, and I learned to go swimming, and I learned to ride a bicycle and pick blueberries. I was starting to be a regular American little girl, and I spoke a lot of English, and I learned to speak very quickly so that English became my mother tongue. But one day, Anna's family came, and everybody looked very sad and was crying. And he said, okay, you have to come with us now. And they took me to a place, and they didn't explain to me the place because they thought I was so wise about death. I didn't know anything about it. They took me to a cemetery. Anna, my new mother, had died. A lot of people after the war, we don't realize, they came back so sick, physically, emotionally, mentally. And Anna, even though they took her to a hospital and they gave her penicillin and all the proper things, she died. And then Jewish people said 7 days of mourning. It's called Shiva. And now Anna's family had a problem. I was their problem. Anna, my mother, brought me over, but now that she was dead, they really didn't want another child to feed and clothe and educate. Somebody in that family knew somebody in Brooklyn, New York, who had no children. And I guess the conversations must have been going on. And that family, the woman you're looking at, was my mother. They invited me to their home, and I came there, and everything was lovely. They had a big home, and they gave me food, and they also gave me a game, and they talked to me. But they had a little dog. you know how I feel about dogs. The fear of dogs never leaves you. But I wasn't going to show them that I was afraid of the dog, because maybe they would like the dog better than me. And I was told to behave, because if I would behave and they would like me, they would keep me. They did like me. And they asked me if I want to be their daughter. And I did. And the woman you're looking at now lived till she was 100 years old. And she took care of me. So for most of my life, I really had a very good life. They nurtured me, they loved me, they gave me a good education. I had music lessons, I went out on dates, and then I met this wonderful, wonderful man. And today would have been our 63rd anniversary. Oh, keep that other picture. Oh, that's my man. That was my husband. He was a lawyer and he was a rabbi. And every day he wrote me notes that God saved me for him and for our children. And unfortunately, he passed away now, but I still have all his notes, and I have his children and everything that that you can imagine. In 1981, there was a gathering of Holocaust survivors, and my family said, let's go. Maybe somebody else survived. Let's look. We checked. Nobody in my family survived. There were 2 cousins who were young, and they came to Israel, and they did not want me. They were in their 20s. And so the Globes were able to adopt me, and I became an American citizen. And in 1984, we came to Israel. We made Aliyah. And in 89, there was a trip. I started volunteering in Yad Vashem. I was a guide in the art museum and in the historical museum. And we went to 1989, and you saw a picture before that I hired guides because I don't speak Polish. Yiddish was the common language in the camps. And I found my birth certificate. I found my brother's birth certificates. I found my parents' marriage license. You can keep that. Okay. No, just keep that over there. And I found my apartment. I found so many, many things that I thought I knew. And then I found this letter where I had been in the ghetto and in different camps and liberated from Bergen Belsen and in Sweden. All the things I told you now, I have absolute proof. And also now I have 2 birthdays. The birthday that I use, that I got in 1945, which belonged to Fanny, and the birthday that I found. I felt very, very lucky to find these things. When I came back, the people in Yad Vashem asked me to give testimony, and I've been giving it. The picture you're looking at now, I was invited to go to South Africa to speak to the people. And the man in the center, the boy on the side is my grandson, who came with me because my husband was sick. And the man in the center is the head of the correctional facilities in Durban, South Africa. And I was on the radio, and he asked me to come to Durban to speak to the inmates in prison. And the reason he wanted me to speak to them is because you never give up hope. If you study, if you say you're sorry for what you did, you can reignite yourself and you can become somebody. So I went to South Africa to speak in a prison. And the next picture will show you that, those are my 2 grandchildren. Of course, this was taken a while ago, and that boy now has 6 children of his own, but it says this is the future generation. And thank God we have a future. And I think all of us have to live life to the fullest. We have to laugh as much as we can and love as much as we can and pray that there won't be any war. And I think what Your Excellency had said and the prayers that we've done, I hope that God is listening, and I hope we will have peace. There is no reason for wars. We have enough land, we have enough water, we have enough food. If only we could have peace and live together, we could have a wonderful world. So thank you again for inviting me. Questions? I'm ready to ask.
So, thank you so much. And this is time for the audience. We're going to take several questions from the audience. Rena, I've discussed it with her, and she will be happy to answer your questions. We'll take about 3 questions, depending on the time. So the first question will be,
hi, Ms. Quinn, and Dr. Deutsch.
Hello.
This is Katie Chen from the Taiwan Foundation for Democracy. First, I would like to thank both of you for spending time, your precious time, with us on this important event, and especially to Ms. Quinn for telling us your story and educating us on what happened in this really horrible part of human history. But we also could learn from your story of how not to repeat this kind of history again. So now I am wondering if you could share some of your words of wisdoms and encouragement for the audience and for the people of Taiwan who will watch your video later. We are currently facing authoritarian intimidation every day. What do you think, how can we proceed forward to the future and with courage and resilience? Your message for the Taiwanese people, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we're going through some very, very difficult times and very worrying. But I think we have to show the world that fighting doesn't help anybody. Not only did 6 million Jews die or were murdered in the Holocaust, but how many Russians, how many Americans, how many British, how many Japanese, people from all over the world. War is bad for everybody. We have to help each other. We have to love each other, and it's the government and it's our people, and we have to encourage the people in our government to do this. And right now, we have to give as much help to the people who need it. If you see poor people around, if you see sick people around, if you see people who need homes, we have to be the people to help them. And thank God we're in a position to do that.
Thank you, Rena. We have time also for spontaneous questions from you, if anyone would like. So I understand that there's a mic going around.
I'll answer any questions that you have. And if you can't ask them now, then you can write to us in Yad Vashem and we will answer them afterwards. I like questions because then I know what you're hearing and what you're interested in.
Thank you, Mrs.
Yes.
Quint. Thank you for your inspiring, for sharing your story. It's very moving. How often
Thank
do
you. I had to do it very short, but I hope you got the point. Yes.
No, we certainly did. Thank you. How often do you do these talks? How often?
Well, lately, my friend Dr. Deutsch has been asking me to speak to Vietnam and to Japan and to Italy, and then I have a lot of students who would like to hear it, and I'm ready to speak at any time. I wrote a book. The book is called A Daughter of Many Mothers, and I was asked to speak to a high school for the older students, and they want to use it as a textbook, both to teach English, because Hebrew is our language, and to learn a little bit about the Holocaust, especially from a child point of view. So I will do as many as you like. And right now with Zoom, I've gotten, at the age of 86, I have learned to use Zoom and Microsoft Teams and Blue Jeans and webinars. So anybody who wants to have something in your school or with your family, just contact me and I can do it straight from my home. I think it's very important. Another question? Yes, please. Please, yes.
I'm very inspired by your talk, and I think this kind of talk is really a very important teaching and lessons for the whole world to really understand. But what bothered me today is what is going on, in Ukraine. The World War II has ended, and the Nazi, atrocity has ended, almost 70, 80 years ago. And now, on the 21st century, the world is repeating very much the kind of atrocity, that's happened in 1930s and 40s. And my remark is not really a question. It could be a question, because how can the world do better, with the kind of education and the personal experience you have, and really make the world appreciate that the history, bad history, should not be repeated. And I'd like to hear your comment on this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, we know that if you don't know your history, it'll happen again. We have to know our history so we learn not. But when you say you're bothered by these atrocities, so am I. In the 21st century, there's no reason for it. What are we looking for? What are we trying to get? Land? We have enough land. And what's happening in Ukraine now, by the time Putin gets it, there won't be anything left there, just a lot of broken down buildings. There's no need about it. But when I think about it, in 1945, the Russians helped win the war against Hitler. The Russians helped us. And now they are doing the same terrible, terrible things. And the things that they're doing are something that I just don't understand. If you're bombing military places, if you're thinking of destroying things like that, but to bomb a maternity ward and to bomb a children's home and to not let people go out when they have caravans trying to leave the country, is just something undescribable. There's nothing we can do. We just have to pray to God. I believe very strongly in that, and try to help the people who are coming to us. I know that Israel is opening up its doors to a lot of people. Israel is made of immigrants, so we know it. And at first, people were concerned of how many people we can take, but now we'll say we'll take anybody who wants to come. And many of the people we have schools and we have institutions. People are willing to take immigrants into their homes, but otherwise there's so many other places that we could put them into. I just hope that all of us pray that things will get better. I don't know if the sanctions are helping. I'm not a military person. I don't have the government. Thank God I don't have to make these decisions. I just have to hope and pray, as I'm sure all of you are doing. Are there any other questions? Any personal questions that I can answer better than people in the government? And the thing that you mentioned before about anti-Semitism is a very worrying thing also. Not in Ukraine, you've got all citizens. It doesn't matter what their religion is. But in many other places, anti-Semitism is very much new. It's coming back very strongly. We have to fight that.
Thank you for allowing us today to learn so many lessons. But my question as a student now is, how do you think, what is the best way for us students to learn? Do you think there is any way we're supposed to learn the best from the Holocaust events so we can improve our world? Because as you said, we're the future generation now.
Well, you as a student are certainly the future. And I have spoken to many students, and in Israel, many of the high school students have to interview a Holocaust survivor to learn what happened. And by learning it, I have a little great-granddaughter. I should have told you, I have 22 grandchildren and 40 great-grandchildren so far. And I have a little great-granddaughter who was 5 years old, and on the day that the Israelis have their Holocaust Day, she came into school and the teacher asked if she knew any Holocaust survivors, and she said, yes, my grandmother, and she was a boy. And the teacher didn't know what she was talking about, and she called my granddaughter, the mother of Hila, and she says, your granddaughter, your child is smart, and she says things, but she said something about your mother. Did she have an operation? What happened? She says, no, she pretended to be a boy. And that's what she got from it. But then she said, something happened. On the way home, Hila fell. And so she came home and I bandaged her knee and I said, it's okay. And she said, but who took care of Grandma Rena when she was a little girl? If she didn't have a mother, who took care of her? And thank God, Odelia, my granddaughter, said, well, she had 6 mothers. And that's what we have to do. we have to think of helping other people. I think hearing testimonies, I spoke to a school in Chicago and it was snowing and very, very cold. And the questions they asked me more than anything else, not about eating and not about shooting, they wanted to know, how could you walk in the snow without proper boots? How could you walk in the snow without a coat? How could you lie down without a blanket? They were so interested because that spoke to them. And I think that every question, I don't like questions about the government because I don't know how to do it, but I can answer questions on personal things and what I can do on a personal level and what everybody else. So I think hearing testimonies and having the history is very, very important. So I thank you for that question.
Thank you for the questions. I just want to thank Rena again for being with us. By the way, personally, also my son had interviewed Rena, and Rena does this, I would say, about 5 to 10 times a week. We do it together sometimes. Sometimes she does it alone. And I think the thing that also the audience sees as far as this interview, the main thing is the importance of the individual story and the impact such a thing could have. And this is what we do at Yad Vashem. We voice these stories and we attempt to find ways to voice as broadly as we can. And this is directly linked to human rights, the way Rena presents it. So thank you very much, Rena. We appreciate it. And I wish to thank the audience for taking the time and listening to her story.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to Ms. Quint and Dr. Deutsch. Thank you.
Thank you.